Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today we are going to take a look at the state of the private banks in India. This is a follow-up to the announcement that the CEO and MD of Axis Bank, Shikha Sharma, is going to take early retirement, or she is going to leave office sometime during this year. Now, before I invite our guests, I want to try and explain a few data points that I noticed while I was prepping for this particular talk. What I noticed was two of the three private banks, ICICI and Axis Bank, they have, let's take ICICI Bank for start. ICICI Bank has about 35% foreign holdings and its PE ratio is around 52. Axis Bank has 56% foreign holding and its PE is 89. What PE means? Price to earnings ratio. And for a bank, these two numbers are really, really high. I'll just give you a contrast. Infosys has a price to earnings ratio of 16, and Apple 17. Netflix, which is a very fast growing company, has a price to earnings ratio of 216. And Amazon is even higher, it's around 300 plus. Now, be that as it may, what really piqued my interest about the PE ratios was, what is the reason for the PE to be so high for these two private banks? And one thought that occurred to me, and maybe I won't say what my thought is, let me first invite our guest today. Today's guest is Sri M R Venkatesh, an expert on finance, corporations, money, black money, you name it. He's one of the first people I defer to whenever I have questions. MRV, welcome to PGurus channel.
Hello, Iyer. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. So why is the PE ratio so high for these two banks?
You referred me as an expert on black money. I don't know what that means. Does it mean that I know? So probably therein lies the rub. I would suggest, Mr. Iyer, that it is eminently possible that some of these shareholders who are, when I did a calculation of all the three banks, the well-known private sector banks, HDFC, Axis, as well as ICICI, I did a computation and found out that roughly 60% or close to 2/3 of the holding were not in India. And in fact, there is a very funny categorization that they are foreign-owned Indian-managed banks.
Correct. Correct.
You know, our ability to create, napunsakas is phenomenal and legendary. You know, we neither are here or there. Even between 0 and 1, we can create a billion possibilities, and that's what we do. And these banks are supposed to be foreign banks, and so they don't adhere to certain RBI norms in terms of prime sector lending and other things. But at the same time, they are forced to do certain things. No, I don't know where it actually is an RBI, which I think must be one of the RBI is basically a dodo institution. And when I say dodo institution, I mean that it requires a serious audit of its functioning of the last decade or so, especially post-liberalization. It has a lot of catching up to do with what's happening. And my guess is, unless RBI functions robustly and thus what it is supposed to do, being the regulator, I would always find that Shikha Sharmas of the world will suddenly tender resignation, or a Chanda Kochhar. Till date, there is nothing technically amiss as far as ICICI Bank is concerned, but the stench somehow seems to emanate from that bank, and by the day it's becoming unbearable. So RBI is somehow looking at it as if it is happening in Timbuktu. It's all the data to RBI, and RBI is supposed to tell us, even if there is something wrong or something going amiss, it is supposed to come and make a candid statement. But RBI somehow seems to be oblivious about it. And that's what stuns me in all these things. We somehow seems to the national bird is somehow not peacock, it's ostrich. we have to somehow change the national bird, and everybody seems to have an ostrich-like attitude when it comes to dealing with these type of touchy subjects. And Shikha Sharma and Chanda Kochhar are regarded as some sort of high priests of finance, and the pink papers have declared it 20 years back. So they don't have the gall, the gumption to actually question them. So today we are not putting them onto a critical scrutiny as what, say, Sri Iyer or M R Venkatesh would have been done had we been in that place.
Sir, I have a fundamental question. I looked at their backgrounds and I'm still struck as to what qualified them to get to that post they got. I mean, there was a story about Teen Didiya in ICICI Bank. But leave that aside, what did they do in a previous life that qualified them to these banks? I don't want you to answer this question, sir, because I don't know if you don't want to answer. But let me give it a. Do you have anything to add to that?
I have, and I will have something more. When I was studying in Standard 5, my teacher told me there is nothing called coincidence in life. It is the hidden hand of a person pulling the pulley, right? So you were at the right time, at the right place, obliging the right persons. And here you are, the MD of a bank for 10, 15 years. That's how it has been for these two ladies. I wish them all well. But as you said, what made them the most suitable candidate for that particular post? I don't know. And the truth to be told is that unless you know the ownership of these banks, please understand, this is the most sensitive thing. Unless you know the ownership of these banks, Mr. Iyer, you will never be able to find out who appointed them in the first place. ICICI's ownership is unknown. HDFC's ultimate ownership is unknown. Axis Bank's ultimate ownership is unknown. And they are all called phantom banks. They are all run by phantoms. And when phantoms work, they always nominate somebody who is amenable to the phantom. And unless RBI, which otherwise talks about corporate governance in Abdul Kader and company and Ramnath Iyer company, does not have the gumption to finally tell us who owns ICICI. This is a question I've been screaming for the last 10, 15 years. Who is the ultimate beneficial owner of ICICI? Who is the corporate directing mind of ICICI? If it is Ambani's, we know it is Reliance. If it is Mr. Tata, we know it is Tata Group. All these things we know. But when it comes to this particular company, it looks as if the board comes in all together. The board sits down. The board takes a function. Come on, give me a break. I know things don't work that way. RBI is like Alice in Blunderland. It has to wake up. It has to wake up quicker. It has to wake up early. It has to tell us how these banks function. And once you get the answer, who owns all these banks, you know why Shikha Sharma is there in the first place. You will know why Chanda Kochhar is there in the first place. Otherwise, you will never know.
So if I read between the lines of what you just said, the chances are that the investment, the percentage of investment that I mentioned at the beginning, Axis 56% foreign holdings and ICICI about 36%. These are probably high net worth individuals who, for the most part, reside in India and perhaps have used the vehicle of participating or nothing illegal about all this. I'm just making some, dot.
It is not participatory notes alone. It is not participatory notes alone. Actually, ICICI Bank shares are held as a GDR in some New York bank through a trust. And we do not know who has actually purchased the GDRs and who owns the GDRs.
What is the GDR?
It is Global Depository Receipts.
Oh, so it's just like ADR, this is GDR. Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, so that's how they have managed to camouflage it, and the ultimate beneficial owner of these banks are totally unknown. And we talk about money laundering laws, we talk about so many stringent laws. Mr. Iyer, let me put it bluntly. Why should it be a high net worth individual? Why should it not be a politician or a group of politicians, a cabal who have invested in all three private sector banks?
So my definition of high net worth individual included a politician, even though the politician may not be
No,
willing to accept that.
no, no, it is not a politician. I'm talking about a cabal sits in Delhi, and nobody raises this question whether A party comes to power or B party comes to power. So my reading is it is a Delhi cabal which runs across the political spectrum that is owning all these banks. And unless RBI, I challenge RBI to do a due diligence and tell us that it is. I will be happy to be proved wrong. I am ready to eat crow, but provided RBI gives me the truth.
I think you've already, in a previous talk, mentioned that the entire board of RBI needs to be set aside. In fact, I think this is adding more weight to that. But I was struck by the similarities between two entities. And if you will bear with me, I'll explain what I mean by that. NDTV and ICICI. In NDTV, sons and daughters of Babus find a place. In ICICI, sons and daughters of RBI seem to have found place there. Do you see this similarity, MRV?
I see similarity not only in these two institutions. I would see similarities in PricewaterhouseCoopers, in KPMG, in Deloitte, in Ernst & Young, where the whole damn bureaucracy parks its children in all these fancy consulting companies, and they are posted, believe it or not in Nagpur, not in Chennai, not in Goa, but they are always posted in Singapore, they are posted in London, they get the plum postings also. So the point is, all these organizations which talk about transparency, we have corporate governance, we have got independent directors, we have got SEBI, we have got RBI, we got damn regulators. All these things are happening right under their noses, and nobody, believe me, nobody seems to connect the dots. And in 2003, a group of chartered accountants led by Sri Gurumurthy wrote a white paper on these big four accounting firms, where the pattern in as early as 2003, which is 15 years back, was clearly discernible that if you are a Babu, your son, daughter, son-in-law, daughter-in-law shall, SHALL, will be employed by any of these big fours. And these big fours are themselves located in tax havens. Their ownership is unknown. They are phantom organizations. Can you tell me who owns Ernst & Young?
I don't.
And these jokers come and talk about corporate governance and transparency. Defense contracts are given to these jokers in the country as consultancy. And I shudder to think, what if it is a company based, and one of these big four is in Bahamas, and for all that Osama could have been the owner of this company, because we don't know, and they refuse to deal with any of this ownership, and they are called by CII, they are called by FICCI, they are called by ASSOCHAM, and our captains of industry are so ignorant that they call these jokers and to tell them how corporate governance has to be carried out in their respective organizations and respective companies. And I shudder. If I turn around and ask them, where is your owner and who is your owner? Tell me, where are you headquartered? There is no answer.
Well,
and everybody is silent about it. I mean, this silence is so deafening.
There is a way out of this. In the sense, India's Chartered Accountant and Institute of Chartered Accountants is a fairly robust organization. I'm just telling you, 20,000 foot level. I know there are issues down underneath, but they can.
I never the robust organization. I'm glad that you told me. But anyhow, good luck to you. I don't want to change your thought.
Let me finish the thought, sir. If the big four are hopeless, I mean, I don't think the local chartered accountant bodies, can fill in the slack. What I'm trying to come at is, if tomorrow there's a conscious decision that we shall use our own internal chartered accountants, resources to do these accounting, probes and things like that, I don't think the India-based chartered accountants, such as yourself, will do a job which is worse than what the big four have done.
No, I am not in competition with Big Four. I am much, much superior to them. So forget it. But be that as it may, I am only on a principle. that for the last 15 years since the white paper, we have been screaming and asking a very fundamental question: who owns the big four accounting firms and how they are in India and how are they operating in India in utter violation of the WTO agreement? Nobody is answering. Nobody is refusing to even see the question. So there is a larger interest at play. And that is also evident in ICICI Bank and Axis Bank and HDFC banks. Several of these banks, large chunk of ownership is unknown. And if you ask them, they say they are owned by FIIs. And FIIs, by definition, camouflage their ownership. And we all know, as in the case of UBS versus SEBI, the ultimate ownership of several of these FIIs itself is in doubt. And so, to allow them to operate in India, to allow them to operate through participatory notes, on which I have written a very big book, Sensex and Sentiments, based on the UPS order of the SEBI. I would urge only one thing, that unless watchdogs begin to bite and unless watchdogs begin to bark, Mr. Iyer, you and I, as activists, as at best commentators, have a very limited role to play. In India, watchdogs don't bark or bite.
Interesting metaphor there. I think we do get viewed by many people in high positions in the government and outside, and they do heed to some of our recommendations. And here is one such recommendation from Mr. Venkatesh and myself: the watchdogs need to not just bark, but they also need to bite. On a humorous note, I want to tell you a story. We have a local courier in the Bay Area. The Bay Area is about 400 miles, it's 600 kilometers. It just rings the ocean that comes inside. So in this area, this is a courier service, just like FedEx and UPS. Up until 2001, up until 9/11, their phone number used to be 1-800-VBARK, B-A-R-K. And this is Bulldog Express is the name of the company. They have a very nasty looking bulldog, and it will say 1-800-VBARK. After 9/11, business became really tough. So they needed to reinvent themselves and to put some humor into their advertising. You know what they did? They changed their phone number, 1-800-VBITE.
But I wish RBI learns from them. I wish ICII learns from them, because after 15 years, thanks to an intervention in the Supreme Court now says that the presence of big four accounting firms in India violates the Chartered Accountants Act, and is urging the Chartered Accountant Institute to look into this whole damn thing. And the Chartered Accountant Institute is now sending notices. That means for the last 25 years, there has been a gross violation. And it is not that the institute did not know. I have made a representation before the Giant Gokhale Committee in 2002, telling that here is something that is going greatly amiss. At that time, we had an organization called Chartered Accountant Action Committee, which was headed by Shri Gurumurthy and several leading chartered accountants. Council after council was oblivious to a fundamental fact that there was, and you won't believe, when I was in the committee, the person who was hearing and listening to this was Mr. Gopalakrishnan, the infamous Gopalakrishnan who signed the Satyam's balance sheet years later. And I had the gall to tell him, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, you cannot sit on this committee because you are conflicted and I am going to make a direct charge on you. You cannot sit on the committee. But at the ICII did, corporate governance is such a beautiful term that will only for pontification to others. But when it came to their own functioning, they pleaded with me and said, Mr. Gopalakrishnan shall continue in this committee and he will listen to you. It was like going to the villain of the piece and pleading with him that you please hang yourself. And the villain would say so graciously that get lost, and I had to come back. So this was what was happening. And why was it that people like Mr. Gopalakrishnan were allowed is the larger question. Why is it that nobody saw this coming? And in GTB, the Global Trust Bank, it was Pricewaterhouse. Years later, it was Satyam. It is Pricewaterhouse. So I tell my advice, whenever I give my advice to some of these corporates, I tell them, if Big Four is your accountant or your chartered accountant or your auditor, then that means in my scale, you are the highest level of risk. So big four accounting firms per se means, but you will not believe, sir. But when you go to a bank, when you go to a financial institution, they all believe that once it is signed and stamped by the big four, no questions will be asked, because they know the person who has signed it, the person who is doing consultancy here, is all sons and daughters, sons-in-law and daughters-in-law of some bureaucrat. So nothing will be asked, nobody will whisper, and it is a huge cabal out there. Unless we break this nexus, unless we break this bureaucrat Babu employee nexus, you know what I mean, and unless we get rid of it, and unless every Babu declares where the sons and daughters-in-law are working, we are going to have a huge problem. And these consultancy are going to prove very costly.
I think you have made some very telling points in this discussion. Let's hope that, as a advisory, the people in power take heed, and we will keep talking about this. And at the end of the day, we all have the best interests of Bharat at heart, and hopefully, sanity will prevail, and it will prevail soon. Thank you very much, MRV.
Thank you.